Hello, everyone. Nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Let's start with a brief round of introductions. How about we start with Robin?
Yeah, my name is Robin Kohze. I'm the CEO and founder of Vaionex. I'm also the CTO of the Block Dojo. Both are one is an infrastructure company. There we focus on making it easier to integrate blockchains into traditional systems. The other one, Block Dojo, is an incubator that started up to date 17 startups. Yeah.
Cool. Mukul.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Mukul. I'm the co-founder of Crubn and currently working on e-governance solutions that can be enhanced using blockchain. So I graduated from IIT Bombay in 2017, and after that I worked for a year, but I finally found my love for blockchain. And since then I joined a national blockchain project at IIT Kanpur under the leadership of Professor Sandeep Shukla. So from there, we've been working on various kinds of e-governance solutions using blockchain.
Shikher.
Hi, I'm Shikher. I'm responsible for everything technology at Dastafilez, which is a virtual data room for M&A deals. And we're also moving towards providing a virtual solution for timestamping your intellectual property and other data that can benefit from the properties of data of blockchain.
Leandro Nunes, I'm Chief Revenue Officer at nChain. We are a software solution company empowered by BSV with layer 2 and solutions on top of a blockchain. So we do have a platform as a service called nChain and solutions that solve for data integrity, digital identity, tokenization, and other that support use cases, especially in iGaming industry, financial services, and supply chain.
Thank you. So starting off, I wanted to ask a very rhetorical question. This is a blockchain conference, but still, coming to data integrity, might you guys know of a way to do it other than blockchain? Does such a method exist?
Sure, absolutely. You could just put it on a central server, but that kind of defeats the point. You've got to trust the central authority that they will keep the data safe, which is how things are currently working. But with blockchain, we can do it in a much better, decentralized way.
Yeah, so would it be fair to say that when it comes to data integrity, there is no other solution than blockchain?
I don't know if it is fair to say. What is fair to say is data is about trust. And if you have a central authority that is a repository of this data, it's hard to find trust or to gain trust among the participants of a network or a solution, for example. When this is decentralized and this is distributed to the ledger and everybody has a sort of a visibility of what's going on, and the ones that should have the visibility. So it's right to say a data integrity on blockchain, it's more reliable. Again, trust, and in technology, trust means adoption. So if people trust, they adopt that solution, and that tends to gain scalability. So to me, that's the right statement.
Yeah.
So what also can be done is, I would say that blockchain is one of the most efficient solutions for this, but like in Estonia, what happens is they do have a KSI blockchain that helps with the integrity of data, but they also do print out the hashes of that blockchain on a newspaper. So in theory, you could, print all that data on a newspapers and do all of that. But yeah, blockchain is an efficient solution for that.
Sounds very inefficient, but cool. So moving on, I mean, now that it's settled that blockchain is probably the most efficient way of ensuring data integrity, next comes what would be the likeliest use cases? For the best use cases where you can prove your metal really quickly, both for industry and government.
Yeah. So we at Dastafilez have made that bet that the data that benefits most from this are legal documents that you need to prove in code that they were created at the time they were created, and they are it's the same document that was created 12 months ago. So I think the very obvious thing for us was that all the merger and acquisition deals that happen, and there's a lot of data that exchanges, and both parties have to verify that the other parties, whatever data they are presenting, are genuine, and they cannot later change the you could take the balance sheet of a company as an example. If a company presents balance sheet A later on 4 months down the line, they should not be able to give you a separate copy of that balance sheet and say that the other one was faulty. You need to have a way to be able to say that this is not the same file that you presented 4 months ago. So definitely legal documents are one. The other one being intellectual property. If an artist is creating music, he needs a way to say that this piece of music, this piece of art was created by me and not someone else. And I know right now what we do for that is patents, but with blockchain we could make the whole patent system much more efficient.
Sure, sure. And do you have a product already for that?
Sure, the Dastafilez has been live since 2020, so we have been part of fairly large M&A deals in Europe, mainly Germany and Switzerland. Last year, a piece of land exchanged hand in Spain, and I obviously can't disclose which companies were involved, but the deal itself was for 30 million. So that's the main use case where blockchain is actually enabling companies to do high-risk deals and be able to verify each other's data without the risk that the file presented is false, and later on people changing the file that they presented.
Moving to Robin, maybe. Robin, tell us about MetaShard or...
Yeah. So with MetaShard, we created a service to look up data that you posted on chain, because it's usually a one-way route. I post something on chain, but how do I get it off again? Maybe a blockchain explorer, so I get single TXIDs. That gives me some information, but it doesn't give me bundled information. So if you want in real time, all information may be related to new property ownership in a certain region, maybe in India, in Bangalore. Then you would just set up a shard, and that shard would pull you directly from the blockchain all information of all new ownership updates in the region. And that's kind of where I agree to the earlier statement, data is about trust. And trust can be, the requirement for trust can be reduced by transparency. And that's essentially what blockchain gives us. It gives us a way to verify the data was actually in a certain block, it was time-stamped, and because we have a certain price tag on the blockchain, to not change it, because once we break the hash, the whole integrity is in danger. So once we have those systems, we have, first of all, transparency. And now we need to use transparency to apply to real-world use case, so like land ownership right transfers. And the second aspect is that we also need to give users the ability to look into the blockchain. Let's say I want to buy a piece of land. I need to be able to see the history of the sales history of that land to make sure I'm not running accidentally in a dispute by maybe buying the land that wasn't even owned by the person who claimed to own it. And suddenly it unleashes economic efficiency. And that's kind of why this whole system makes sense.
Cool. So what you just described is, if I have a way of putting my data on chain, I would surely need a way to access it at some point of time. And MetaShard does that. So
MetaShard is definitely more a development tool.
Yeah.
So developers would then integrate it into their actual platforms to then show in real time what updates were done there.
Cool. Mukul, so we've heard of lots of success stories from Crubn recently, right? Tell us about a few of them, specifically in the domain of data integrity. For example, the Karnataka one.
Yeah, so data integrity is very important when you have a asset transfer of a very high value, right? So property being one of those. So what we did with the government of Karnataka was to have property registration documents on the blockchain. So here we're just not only providing integrity to these property registration documents, but we also create a trail of provenance. So A transferred the property to B, B then took mortgage on that property. All of that we encoded, we researched a lot. Almost 9 months went into a research of what all kinds of transactions happen on a property, all the kinds of property registrations. So we did all of that and we converted that into a code. We deployed this network in the government of Karnataka's data store, and then IIT Kanpur, STPI. We tried to decentralize the network as much as we could. And then this went live last year in November. So since then, there have been almost 15,000 transactions of property registrations on this network, and we've issued almost 20,000 smart cards. So what we did with smart cards was that we gave the power of transferring the property to the citizen in form of a smart cards. So all their keys that are required to write on the blockchain, we gave them in their control, which was secured by a PIN. So that way, only they can transact on a property and no one else could do that.
Leandro, I'm sure you have lots to say on
Yeah, on the
what
data,
you
on the
guys are
data
building.
side, yeah, on the data side first, it's a combination of what is most things become most powerful in terms of the data is the fact that we can, like Craig said before, we can get data, a token data plus money, right? It's very important because then you own the data, right, in a way, and you can use this data to make decisions. One thing that you do as a platform, as a service that we had, like I mentioned, can say, it's we build it on top of our blockchain infrastructure, BSV, and in using this to a lot of things that we can, in fact, connect to the blockchain, but also connect to the solutions of our partners and so on. So we can have, for example, notarization over there, right? We can have use case of traceability, right? We can use it to connect to solutions like we have a solution called Asset Ledger for tokenization. So that the data that comes from there. So you create a layer, a data layer, right? Very important to bring this scalability to the use cases. And then on top of it, you treat it one of the use cases as a part as a way to immutably record that in the blockchain. So with this, you don't need to pass the data through the blockchain. That becomes blockchain becomes an indexer where we hash and record the data there. But at the same time, you integrate the solutions into this platform as a service. It's gaining traction super fast. Make our team very busy with the use cases, and we have different industries. People ask me, but what industry you are? I mean, anything related, any use case that need data in the blockchain, in supply chain, for example, it can be used. But we also see this in the healthcare. So everything, or like I said before, when you have this lack of trust, right, and this data silos can be solved for platforms like that, knowing that the blockchain is in the back end doing its job of immutably record the hashes and the addresses where the data is.
Any clients in India?
No, that's what I'm here for.
Okay, I see. Yeah, so I mean, all of you guys have your own ways of solving this problem, right? So I was just wondering, what is the cost analysis? So if, for example, there's a question for all of you. If I want to use your product, how much does it cost? So maybe starting with Mukul.
Yeah, so our property registration solution that was sponsored by the national government. So we didn't actually charge for that, but there could be a few models that we could do. One is charging per transaction. So every change in the property registration, we can charge for that. But that usually don't make sense that much because it's the government that is involved and you cannot charge them on a per transaction basis. So this was a more of a service-based project. So we could have charged them for the entire solution.
Okay, but my question is also how much it actually costs. Maybe you're not passing it down to the end user because it's a service that the government wants to offer for the betterment, but how much does the government incur per transaction if they are running those nodes?
So this would be like we put in almost like 6 to 9 months of development effort. So
Yeah.
the cost of that.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about the pure cost of validating a transaction.
So we did set up a permission network.
Yes,
So
yes.
that was almost like 3 lakhs per month of server cost.
Okay,
So that's what the cost was.
okay, okay,
Because this was a permission setup with a few set of nodes, only 5 nodes in this network.
okay.
So the cost was pretty less than what it is on the Ethereum network, let's say.
Right, right.
For Dastafilez, we just charge $5 per user and $10 per team, and I find that to be more than enough to write data onto the BSV blockchain, because the fee rate at BSV is quite low. Like per byte, you just need 0.5 sats, and it keeps on going down. So it keeps on increasing our profit margins actually. And I mean, we just store the hash of the file, and we give the end user the capability to write the file on chain if they prefer to do that. And they can connect Handcash and other wallets to actually transfer the BSV to write the full file on chain. But just storing the hash is quite cheap, and if you're just storing that for all files, it comes out to be 200 300 rupees, which is $4 for all their data, because once you hash the file itself is not there, you just need to store a few bytes. So yeah, that is the model we chose, because not every file needs to be on chain. You just need to prove that their authenticity is correct, and that's the same file that was presented. But a lot of our users actually want to write their chats and their final agreements on chain, so we provide it as an extra feature that they can pay for that particular file to go on chain.
Cool.
First, okay. Our model is as a service model. Go for the transaction basis, and depend on the level you are, like with the subscription and the volume, that could cost like a cent of a penny of a dollar, a pound. It's the same reason if the back end is something that costs us a fraction of a cent, because BSV is like that. There's no reason to charge much.
Yeah, and it keeps on going down, so it's only going to get better.
And unless you charge and you encourage more transactions, and you gain an adoption case. So for us, what's really important now, it's the adoption, and I think the financial model would go by itself.
Right. Robin, yeah. Sorry, go
I
ahead.
think we picked a bit of a different business model than the others here. So we said, first of all, it needs to be somewhat aligned with AWS, and so you would expect a certain free limit first before you pay anything. And therefore, if you go now on Realizio.com and you pick up the SDK or the APIs, you can do 100,000 transactions per month for free. And kind of the real price is probably $10 per million transactions on chain. And therefore, kind of once you get over the 100K, then you would need to go to a premium plan, and then you would pay maybe $20 per million, that we also cover our own server costs with it. But ultimately, the 100K probably gives you enough to create any kind of MVP or app to see it really taking off. Because we are more interested in seeing an ecosystem being spawned than really charging the individual transactions. Because ultimately, our server cost is around 5 times higher than the transaction costs we have. Therefore, it's almost a negligible fee compared to all the rest of it, especially when calculating in the development costs of it.
Yeah. Server cost 5 times higher than transaction fees. Okay, cool. So, Mukul, have you considered using BSV because of this low transaction fee? Maybe you have a proof of concept in mind or something to replicate, and then check it out whether that's something that works for your use cases.
Yeah, so one thing that the permission blockchains lack is the kind of decentralization that these public permissionless blockchain provides. So what can be done if there's a use case for it is that all these permission networks that we set up can be anchored to this public permissionless blockchain like the BSV blockchain, and that can actually enhance the trust on these small networks that we have.
Very interesting. Please describe more.
Yeah,
Paint
so
a picture for us.
So as I was saying, let's say we have a set of 5 nodes that are running the property registration network, right?
Yeah.
So if we are to trust them, the trust isn't that much because it's just 5 nodes that we are trusting. If these 5 people controlling these nodes collude,
Yeah.
the data could be changed, right? What we can do in this case is that on certain intervals of time, you can push the hash of this entire small blockchain that we have onto the public permissionless blockchains like BSV. And then we can be sure that this particular blockchain is running the right way because we have the public permissionless blockchain in which there is proof of work to attest the transactions. So we can be sure that this network is also running correctly. So
Yeah, I think that you touched on a good point about public but permission blockchain. So we can have both. So don't, please, for the ones that are using private blockchain, don't get into the trap that has to be, oh, if it's public, it's not permission. You can still get the privacy. I think you'll learn this today
yes.
during the conference, and you can take advantage of the scalability and the low cost, right? So you're doing, I think I'll be happy, to help you in this journey if you want.
Okay, sure.
And like in Dastafilez, we are using BSV to write important documents on chain. These are documents that are responsible for deals of millions of dollars. We obviously can't put the whole document there. So what we did is build the permissions outside of BSV. We have all the documents encrypted, and the keys are only accessible to end users. So we even don't have access to their unencrypted data. But at the end, it's all built on top of BSV. So it's not like BSV is not. It's completely permissionless. You can build a permission model on top of it.
Right.
Just a quick question about your anchoring idea. So the timestamp, you would ideally want to write it to BSV immediately after it gets written, validated on the permission blockchain, right?
Right. So you would write the hash of the blockchain with that timestamp as well.
Immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It can be real time. That's
Yeah, exactly. Right. So maybe a more philosophical question now, because everybody has different ideas about this. How do you imagine the world? What data would you want, Robin? What data would you want on chain, and what data not on chain? Most definitely.
Well, that's mostly the GDPR debate, like should personal information be there, even encrypted? Kind of what if that encryption is too weak? It's kind of a gradual thing, of course. So it's more of first defining what do I want there, then defining what I do not want there. Probably I don't want to have everything there.
But as Leandro said just now, you can have a permissioned ledger on top of a public ledger.
Yeah, but as he said, the permission is based on the encryption. And if I now pick a weak encryption, then in 10 years, this data will likely be very accessible, even though it was now very inaccessible, right?
Correct.
So it's just a function of time when that data is then available. That might be in 10 years or in 50 years. So I think it might start with things that we are actually willing to keep long-term on-chain. Then, of course, we can have overlay networks for things we don't want on-chain, but we still have it tracked on-chain. Like we can always have hashes on-chain, we can have certain pieces of information that still are not enough to puzzle it all together, whereas the rest of the puzzle is then maybe still on a server, and then with certain cryptographic schemes, you can then verify that those actually fit together. I mean, there are many levels of granularity in that question, definitely. But for now, I want to see things like land ownerships that are public registries. I want to see educational certificates that are very public too, actually. Like I could ask a university if this student was actually there as an employer of that person, and that university gives me the information. So that data should easily be on the blockchain, because then I can algorithmically verify CVs of applicants. And I think then gradually we learn more and more to which ways we want to then keep things in overlay networks, to which degrees we keep it directly on chain, encrypted or non-encrypted. It's very business specific in the end.
Right. Any thoughts, disagreements?
No, I just think of the data. Data doesn't need to be on the chain. What needs to be on the chain is the register the record that something has happened off chain, that can refer to the chain. So this is pretty much consider the hash something. We have a lot already scalability to solving the whole ecosystem to think about putting the data over there. Parties just need to agree with what the data is and transact rather than see a data on the chain. So I think it was back my first years of the blockchain, that was a mistake that we see. People would put everything on chain, and it was just impossible to operate. Now I think we are learning this is not the way it is. It's like, we need to register there, immutably record something, and the data stays where the data has to be.
And it's not just privacy. There's also the cost of getting the data to all the miners. So no matter how cheap it becomes, you're fundamentally transferring the same file to 20 or 100 different miners. So it's always going to be more costly than just transferring it to one person.
Exactly.
So apart from privacy, you have the cost barrier.
Yeah, right. The storage infrastructure would be a high cost, and that would put some micropayments, for example, something not viable at all.
So in the BSV ecosystem, we have something called the metanet objects, right?
Yeah.
So you create a metanet object, and then you keep updating it. You have newer versions, and it forms a tree. May I know if there is an equivalent in the Hyperledger system that you use? For example, if you wanted to maybe put the weather data on chain, so it starts with today, and then the humidity, temperature tomorrow, and so on. Is there an efficient way of doing it with whatever you're acquainted with?
Yeah, so there are permission blockchains, so in which you can track all this kind of data. And since it's private and permission, the replication isn't that much that it becomes infeasible to actually put that data on there. Okay. So there are models in the private permission space which can enable you to do that.
Okay. And something just hit me. There was a session on IPv6 and IoT. We didn't hear much about IoT, and it was a great session, but it just feels sad. So I want to know what your vision is, because that also comes under data integrity, right? We would have traffic cams snapping pics of somebody who's over speeding, and that's data integrity, immutable on the chain for the judge to decide. So your thoughts on that, on how we could make progress on that front?
Yeah, the IoT is a way of gathering the data, right? If you see this way, it's easy to understand, right? It's just more like, okay, so how can I automate something, grab the data?
It's
from
more
somewhere?
it's more a question of how you are storing that data.
Yeah, exactly. But what I was getting with that is like, you don't need necessarily again to register the data that comes from the IoT, because the IoT has their own platform solutions. So what we need to record is like the fact that IoT, that device, whatever it is, has sent that information to someplace else. So that's the important thing. So that's the way you see it. So the IoTs are just doors, right? An automated way to get the data, to grab the data, but not necessarily change the fact that, again, the data doesn't need to be necessarily on-chain.
Thoughts?
I mean, one of the use cases that blockchain and IoT can do together is like the IoT device can send important emails. Like someone violating a red light, he could directly send that picture to the blockchain, and then there's no way someone could hack the system and remove their photo of breaking that law.
So like Craig said, we only put the important information on chain.
Only the sensitive data, correct.
So I believe the question should be more on how integrity is maintained on the IoT devices. The IoT devices can push out data that can be stored on blockchain and can be used to maintain integrity. But the important question should be on how do you maintain the integrity of an IoT device? What if someone tampered with the IoT device?
Very good point. So maybe you can have a system where each change made to the IoT device itself gets recorded to the blockchain. So each time you change the circuit or something, that also gets recorded.
I mean, at the hardware level, we have mechanisms whenever a device is opened up.
Yeah, exactly.
It automatically sends a signal and voids the warranty of the phone. So we already have that mechanism built in.
Yeah, that's a very nice point.
Yeah, and you can create an identity to the device as well. So when you do that, you can go at an identity solution. So the device become one of the identity as part of your solution as an individual.
The time's up. So this was really an enriching discussion. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you.